The doctors said his body was broken. The truth was far worse. His hope was. Rain tapped softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Moretti estate, a sprawling stone mansion overlooking the dark waters of Lake Michigan. The sound was steady, almost peaceful, but inside the master suite on the third floor, peace had not existed for a very long time. Vincent Moretti sat motionless in his wheelchair beside the window, staring out at the storm-covered horizon. 20 years. 20 long years since he had last taken a step on his own. 20 years since specialists from New York, Boston, Los Angeles, and even overseas had examined him, tested him, promised possibilities, and eventually delivered the same disappointing conclusion. Nothing more could be done. At 48 years old, Vincent possessed everything most people spent their entire lives chasing: wealth, influence, respect. His business empire stretched across multiple states. His investments appeared in financial magazines. His name carried weight in rooms filled with powerful people. Yet every morning, he opened his eyes to the same prison, a body that refused to obey him, a future that looked exactly like yesterday. On the polished mahogany desk across the room rested a thick folder. His final medical report. Beside it sat another document. His revised will. Vincent looked at neither. He already knew what they contained. The doctor had left less than an hour ago. The last doctor. The final expert his advisors had convinced him to meet. The consultation had lasted 17 minutes. 17 minutes to confirm what Vincent had suspected all along. There would be no breakthrough, no miracle treatment, no hidden solution waiting around the corner. The doctor had spoken carefully, professionally, choosing words designed to soften disappointment. But Vincent had stopped listening halfway through. After 20 years, he no longer needed explanations. He could recognize defeat the moment it entered a room. A quiet knock sounded at the door. "Come in," Vincent said without turning. His longtime assistant, Marcus Reynolds, stepped inside. At 61, Marcus had worked for Vincent for nearly 2 decades. He had seen the businessman at his highest highs and lowest lows. "The papers are ready whenever you are," Marcus said gently. Vincent nodded. "Leave them there." Marcus hesitated. "Are you sure about this?" For the first time, Vincent looked away from the window. His gray eyes appeared tired. Not physically tired. Soul tired. The kind of exhaustion that settled deep inside a person after carrying disappointment for years. "I'm sure," he replied quietly. 20 years is enough." Marcus swallowed. "You still have people who care about you." A faint smile touched Vincent's lips. "That's exactly why I'm doing this." The room fell silent again. Rain continued sliding down the glass. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the lake. Marcus finally nodded and turned toward the door. Before leaving, he paused. "There's one more thing." Vincent sighed. "What now?" A new caregiver arrived this morning. Vincent's expression hardened immediately. "Send her home. She just got here. Then she can leave just as quickly." Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. "She really needs the job." Vincent looked back toward the dark horizon. So did the last 12. This one might be different. Vincent almost laughed. He had heard that sentence too many times. Different. Better. Hopeful. Promising. Words people used when they wanted to believe something could still change. He no longer believed in change. "No one is different, Marcus." As if summoned by fate itself, a soft voice suddenly spoke from the hallway outside. "Maybe that's true." Vincent frowned. The voice continued. "But sometimes people just need someone willing to stay." Vincent slowly turned toward the open doorway. Standing there was a woman he had never seen before. Her clothes were simple. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She looked exhausted, as if life had demanded more from her than it had given. Yet despite the fatigue in her eyes, there was something else there. Quiet determination. Unshaken kindness. The woman offered a small smile. "My name is Emily Carter," she said, "and I'm not planning to leave." Emily Carter had learned long ago that life rarely knocked before it changed everything. Most of the time, it arrived like an overdue bill, a broken appliance, or a phone call you could not afford to answer. The following morning, sunlight filtered through the small kitchen window of her apartment on the south side of Chicago, casting pale gold rectangles across the worn linoleum floor. Emily stood at the counter stirring a bowl of oatmeal, while mentally calculating numbers she already knew by heart. Rent was 12 days overdue. The electric bill was due next week. Her car needed repairs she could not afford. And the balance in her checking account sat at just under $80. Behind her, 6-year-old Lily Carter sat at the tiny kitchen table coloring on the back of an old grocery receipt. Her chest rose and fell with the faint whistle that always appeared when the weather changed. Emily noticed it immediately. Mothers always did. She glanced over her shoulder. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Lily looked up and smiled. "Good." The answer came quickly. Too quickly. Emily knew that smile. It was the smile Lily used whenever she wanted her mother to worry less. Emily forced herself to smile back. The truth was that worrying had become a full-time job. 2 years earlier, Emily had worked as a nursing assistant at a rehabilitation center. The pay was not amazing, but it had been enough to survive. Then budget cuts came. Staff reductions followed. One by one, people lost their positions. Emily was among them. Since then, she had pieced together every job she could find. Home care, temporary caregiving assignments, grocery delivery, evening shifts at a diner. Anything that kept food on the table. Anything that kept Lily safe. The apartment was small enough that Emily could stand in the kitchen and see nearly every room at once. The couch doubled as a bed whenever relatives visited. The paint peeled near the bathroom ceiling. The heater rattled every winter. Yet somehow, Lily still called it home with complete sincerity. That thought alone often kept Emily moving forward. Her phone buzzed on the counter. The screen displayed a message from her landlord. Emily stared at it for several seconds before locking the screen without reading it. Some problems could wait another hour. Lily tilted her head. "Is that another bill?" Emily laughed softly. "You are too smart for your own good. Mrs. Dawson says grown-ups are always worried about money. Mrs. Dawson talks too much." Lily giggled. The sound filled the apartment with something brighter than sunlight. Emily wished she could bottle it. Save it for difficult days. Maybe today would qualify. A black sedan would arrive in less than 30 minutes to take her to the Moretti estate. The agency director had called the previous evening with unusual urgency. The position paid nearly double her normal rate. The client was demanding. The staff turnover was constant. Most caregivers quit within days. Emily had accepted before hearing the rest of the details. She needed the work. Simple as that. What she had not expected was the feeling she experienced when she remembered the man in the wheelchair. The way his eyes looked beyond people instead of at them. The way every word carried years of disappointment. She had met countless patients during her career. Some angry, some frightened, some lonely. Vincent Moretti was different. He looked like someone who had stopped expecting tomorrow to be any better than today. Emily placed a hand against the countertop and exhaled slowly. She could not explain why, but something about him stayed in her thoughts. Not because he was wealthy. Not because of the enormous estate. Because beneath all that distance and frustration, she had seen something familiar. Exhaustion. The kind that had nothing to do with sleep. The kind that settled inside a person after carrying too much for too long. Outside, a car horn sounded gently. Her ride had arrived. Lily hopped off her chair and wrapped her arms around Emily's waist. "You are coming home tonight, right?" Emily kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Always." Lily nodded, satisfied. Emily grabbed her coat, her bag, and the last bit of courage she could find. She had no idea that the job she was about to start would change far more than her bank account. And somewhere across the city, in a mansion overlooking the lake, a man who had already given up on miracles was about to meet the one person who refused to give up on him. The Moretti estate felt less like a home and more like a museum dedicated to silence. Emily noticed at the moment she stepped through the enormous front doors. The marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. Original paintings lined the walls. Every piece of furniture looked as though it belonged in a luxury design magazine. Yet despite all the beauty, something felt strangely empty. No laughter, no conversation, no warmth. Just the quiet hum of expensive air conditioning and the distant ticking of antique clocks. A house this large should have felt alive. Instead, it felt like a place where time had stopped. Marcus Reynolds greeted her in the main foyer. His expression carried the cautious optimism of a man who had seen too many people fail. "Thank you for coming back," he said. Emily smiled. "I said I would." Marcus studied her for a moment as if trying to understand what made her different. Then he led her upstairs. As they approached the third-floor suite, Emily noticed several framed photographs displayed along the hallway. Some showed Vincent years earlier, standing beside business leaders, attending charity events, smiling beside family members. In every picture, his posture was confident, strong, alive. The contrast between those images and the man she had met yesterday felt almost heartbreaking. Marcus stopped outside the suite door. "One piece of advice," he said quietly. "Do not take anything personally." Emily nodded. "That bad?" Marcus sighed. "Most people last 4 days." Before she could respond, a deep voice echoed from inside the room. "If you are going to warn her, at least do it where I cannot hear you." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "Good luck," he muttered before opening the door. Vincent sat near the window exactly where she had left him the previous evening. A newspaper rested untouched on the table beside him. The television was off. The room felt frozen in place. His eyes shifted toward her. "You came back." Emily set her bag down. "That seems to surprise you." "It surprises me when anyone keeps their word." Emily removed her coat and hung it neatly near the entrance. "That sounds exhausting." Vincent frowned. "What does?" "Expecting everyone to disappoint you." For a second, genuine surprise crossed his face. Most people became nervous around him. They agreed with everything he said. They tiptoed around difficult conversations. Emily did neither. Vincent folded his arms. "You should know something before we begin." "All right. You will not fix me." Emily pulled a chair closer and sat down. "I never said I would." "The others did." "Then they made a mistake." Vincent studied her carefully. "Do you know why most caregivers quit?" "Because you are difficult?" A faint twitch appeared near the corner of his mouth. It was not quite a smile. "Honest? You asked." Silence settled between them. Outside, sunlight shimmered across the lake. Inside, Vincent seemed to be waiting for her to say something inspirational, something hopeful, something he could dismiss. Instead, Emily looked around the room. "How often do you leave this floor?" "Rarely." "Why?" "Because there is nothing downstairs worth seeing." Emily nodded slowly. "And that is exactly the problem." Vincent's expression hardened. "You have been here less than 5 minutes. And you have been here 20 years. The words hung in the air. Sharp but not cruel. "Honest." Vincent turned his gaze back toward the window. "You think you understand me?" "No," Emily shook her head. "But I think you have spent a very long time convincing yourself that life ended when your circumstances changed." Vincent laughed bitterly. "You have no idea what you are talking about." "Maybe not." Emily leaned forward slightly. "But I know something about losing the life you thought you were supposed to have." For the first time, Vincent looked directly at her. Not through her. Not past her. At her. The exhaustion in his eyes seemed deeper up close. "Older." "And what happened?" he asked quietly. Emily thought about overdue bills. About sleepless nights. About watching her daughter struggle to breathe during asthma flare-ups. About every setback she had endured. Then she smiled gently. "I kept going anyway." Vincent stared at her for several seconds. Finally, he shook his head. "You will not last 30 days." Emily stood and picked up a notepad from the side table. "Maybe." She smiled again. "But I am still here today." And for reasons neither of them fully understood, that answer lingered in Vincent's thoughts long after the conversation ended. Laughter arrived at the Moretti estate before anyone realized how much it had been missing. 3 days passed. Then 5. The staff noticed something unusual long before Vincent did. The tension inside the mansion felt lighter. Small conversations returned to the hallways. Employees lingered a little longer in common areas. Even Marcus seemed less burdened by the constant pressure that had defined the estate for years. Emily never pushed Vincent. She did not lecture him. She did not arrive carrying motivational books or impossible promises. Instead, she simply treated him like a person whose life still mattered. Every morning, she opened the curtains. Every afternoon, she encouraged him to spend at least an hour outside on the terrace overlooking the lake. Most days he complained. Some days he refused. Emily kept showing up anyway. On Saturday morning, however, a problem emerged. Emily's regular babysitter canceled at the last minute. She stared at the text message while standing in her apartment kitchen. Lily sat nearby, finishing a bowl of cereal. "What is wrong?" Lily asked. Emily sighed. "Mrs. Dawson has the flu." Lily frowned sympathetically. "That is bad." "It is." Emily checked the time. She was already running late. Calling off work was not an option. Not with rent due. Not with medical expenses waiting around every corner. Lily watched her mother think. "Can I come with you?" Emily hesitated immediately. Bringing her daughter to work felt unprofessional. Yet there were no alternatives. After several phone calls and no solutions, she finally contacted Marcus. To her surprise, he answered with a simple response. "Bring her." 2 hours later, Lily stepped into the Moretti estate holding a small backpack decorated with faded cartoon butterflies. Her eyes widened as she stared at the enormous staircase. This place is bigger than my whole school. Emily smiled despite herself. Please try not to say that out loud. Unfortunately, Lily had already said it out loud. Marcus laughed. A housekeeper nearby laughed too. For reasons nobody could explain, Lily possessed a talent for making adults forget their worries. When Emily guided her into Vincent's suite, she found him reading financial reports near the window. He looked up briefly before returning to the documents. I see you brought company. My babysitter canceled, Emily explained. If this is a problem, I can. It is not a problem, Vincent interrupted. Lily stepped forward before either adult could continue. Hi. Vincent lowered the report. Hello. Lily examined him openly. Children rarely worried about social rules. You are Vincent. I am. Mom says you are stubborn. Emily nearly dropped her bag. Lily. Vincent stared for a second. Then another. Marcus froze near the doorway. The room became completely silent. Emily felt her face burn with embarrassment. Then something unexpected happened. A low sound escaped Vincent's throat. Not irritation. Not sarcasm. A laugh. A real laugh. Small at first. Then stronger. Marcus blinked as though he had witnessed a solar eclipse. Emily simply stared. According to the staff, Vincent had not laughed in years. Lily looked confused. Did I say something funny? Very funny, Vincent replied. The little girl smiled proudly and climbed into a chair across from him. For the next 20 minutes, she talked about school, her favorite books, and a science project involving butterflies. Vincent listened. At first he answered with short responses, then full sentences, then questions. Real questions. The kind people ask when they genuinely care about the answers. Emily watched quietly from the corner of the room. She noticed something she had never seen before. The guarded expression Vincent wore like armor had started to crack. Not completely, just enough for a glimpse of the man underneath. Finally, Lily tilted her head and asked, Can I ask you something? Vincent nodded. Sure. Her voice softened. Do you remember the last time you laughed before today? The question landed gently. Yet somehow it felt heavier than anything spoken all week. Vincent opened his mouth, then stopped. His eyes drifted toward the lake beyond the window. Seconds passed, then longer. For the first time since Emily had met him, Vincent looked genuinely uncertain. Not because he did not know the answer, because he realized he could not remember. Some questions are simple. Others quietly unlock doors that have remained closed for years. After Lily's question, the room felt different. Vincent remained silent for several moments, his eyes fixed on the gray waters beyond the window. Emily could almost see him searching through memories he had not touched in a very long time. Finally, he looked down at his hands resting motionless on the wheelchair armrests. I do not remember, he admitted. The answer surprised everyone, including him. Lily frowned thoughtfully. That is sad. Most adults would have rushed to soften the moment. Lily did not. She simply stated what she felt. Honest. Direct. The way children often understood truths that adults spent years avoiding. Vincent nodded slowly. Maybe it is. For the rest of the afternoon, he spoke less than usual. Yet unlike before, the silence no longer felt cold. It felt reflective, almost restless. After Emily and Lily left that evening, Vincent remained awake long after midnight. The mansion was quiet. Moonlight stretched across the lake outside his window. Sleep never came easily anymore. But tonight something else kept him awake. A 6-year-old girl had asked a question nobody else had dared ask, and he could not stop thinking about it. The next morning, Emily noticed the change immediately. Vincent looked tired. Not physically, emotionally, like someone who had spent the night unpacking boxes hidden deep inside an attic. She found him sitting near the fireplace instead of his usual spot by the window. You look like you slept about 2 hours, she said. Vincent almost smiled. 3. Emily handed him a cup of coffee. Progress. For a moment neither spoke. Then Vincent surprised her. Do you know why I stopped laughing? Emily sat down across from him. Only if you want to tell me. He stared into the coffee cup. The steam curled upward between them. 20 years ago, I thought I understood loyalty. His voice remained calm. But Emily sensed something deeper beneath the words. I built my company with family. People I trusted. People I would have done anything for. He paused. Then life happened. Emily listened quietly. Vincent rarely spoke about his past. Most people in the estate knew fragments of the story. Very few knew the whole thing. When everything changed, I expected people to stay, he continued. Some did. Most did not. His eyes drifted toward the fire. At first I was angry, then disappointed. Then eventually I stopped expecting anything at all. Emily nodded slowly. That sounds lonely. Vincent laughed softly, though there was little humor in it. Lonely is a small word. The fire crackled gently between them. Outside, autumn leaves danced across the estate grounds. Inside, 20 years of buried grief sat quietly in the room. Do you know what surprised me most? Vincent asked. Emily shook her head. The people who left were not strangers. His jaw tightened slightly. Strangers owe you nothing. The people who hurt you are usually the ones who promised they never would. Emily looked down for a moment. She understood that more than she wanted to admit. Different circumstances. Same wound. Eventually she spoke. That does not mean everyone leaves. Vincent met her eyes. You sound very sure of that. Emily thought about Lily. About every difficult day she had survived because a small voice called her mom. No, she said quietly. I just think pain has a way of convincing us that the worst thing that happened once will happen forever. Vincent considered that. For the first time in years, someone was challenging the story he had been telling himself. Not aggressively, not dramatically, simply offering another possibility, a different perspective. Later that afternoon, Marcus entered the suite carrying several documents requiring Vincent's signature. Halfway through the meeting, he stopped speaking. Vincent noticed immediately. What? Marcus blinked. Nothing. Marcus. The older man smiled. You asked me a question. Vincent frowned. What is strange about that? Marcus chuckled softly. It is the first personal question you have asked me in almost 8 years. The room grew quiet. Vincent looked genuinely surprised. 8 years. He had not realized how much of himself he had slowly withdrawn from the world. Emily watched from nearby. She said nothing. She did not need to. Because for the first time, Vincent was beginning to see it himself. And sometimes the first step toward healing is not standing up. Sometimes it is simply waking up. The call came just after midnight. Emily was asleep on the couch beside Lily's bed when her phone vibrated across the coffee table. She opened her eyes instantly. Mothers rarely slept deeply. One glance at the caller identification made her sit upright. The local clinic. Her stomach tightened before she even answered. Hello. The nurse's voice sounded calm, but concern lingered beneath every word. Miss Carter, we received the test results from Lily's last appointment. The doctor would like to see her this week. Emily closed her eyes briefly. Medical appointments almost always meant expenses. Expenses usually meant impossible choices. Is everything all right? She asked quietly. The doctor would prefer to discuss it in person. After the call ended, Emily sat alone in the darkness listening to Lily's gentle breathing. Outside, rain tapped against the apartment windows. She stared at the growing stack of unpaid bills on the counter. No matter how hard she worked, life always seemed one step ahead of her. The following morning, she arrived at the Moretti estate carrying that worry like a weight on her shoulders. Vincent noticed immediately. Something happened. Emily looked up from organizing medications. What makes you say that? Because you have spent the last 10 minutes pretending everything is fine. Emily almost smiled. A month ago, Vincent would never have noticed. Now he noticed everything. She hesitated before explaining the phone call. Vincent listened without interrupting. When she finished, silence settled over the room. Finally, he asked, what do you need? Emily shook her head. I am not asking for anything. That was not my question. She looked away. I need Lily to be healthy. Vincent stared at the lake beyond the windows. Reasonable answer. Yet the conversation stayed with him long after Emily returned to work. Later that afternoon, Marcus entered the study carrying financial reports. He stopped when he noticed Vincent reviewing something on a tablet. What are you looking at? Marcus asked. Vincent did not look up. Medical specialists. Marcus blinked. For yourself? Vincent remained silent for a moment. No, the older man smiled softly. Sometimes change happens so gradually that nobody noticed until it was already underway. That evening, as Emily prepared to leave, Vincent surprised her again. How is Lily's science project going? Emily stared at him. You remembered? Apparently. She laughed. She finished it yesterday. Vincent nodded thoughtfully. Good. As Emily walked toward the door, he spoke again. Bring her this weekend. Emily turned. Why? Vincent glanced toward a large, empty room connected to the library. Because a mansion this size should probably have at least one butterfly exhibit. For a second, Emily simply stared. Then she laughed. A genuine laugh. The kind that reached her eyes. After she left, Vincent remained alone in the room. Yet for the first time in years, the silence felt different. Not empty. Not heavy. Outside, the clouds slowly drifted apart, revealing a stretch of evening sky painted gold above Lake Michigan. Vincent watched the light reflect across the water and realized something unexpected. He was looking forward to tomorrow. Saturday arrived carrying a rare kind of sunlight. The sky above Lake Michigan stretched clear and bright, and for the first time in weeks, the Moretti estate felt almost cheerful. Lily ran through the library carrying a cardboard butterfly display nearly as large as she was. Colored paper wings hung from strings attached to a wooden frame Marcus had helped her build. Several members of the household staff stopped their work just to admire it. Lily accepted every compliment as if she were presenting her masterpiece at a world-famous museum. Vincent watched from across the room. "I think your exhibit is attracting more visitors than some actual museums," he said. Lily beamed. "That means it is successful." Emily shook her head. "She gets that confidence from absolutely nowhere." "I heard that," Lily called out. A soft laugh escaped Vincent before he could stop it. Moments like that had become surprisingly common. Not dramatic. Not life-changing. Just small pieces of normal life, quietly returning to rooms that had forgotten what normal felt like. Later that afternoon, Emily received the results from Lily's follow-up appointment. The doctor explained that Lily's condition was manageable, but she would need a more advanced treatment plan moving forward. The news brought relief and worry at the same time. Relief because it was not worse. Worry because the treatment would be expensive. Emily thanked the doctor and ended the call with a smile she hoped looked convincing. It did not. Vincent noticed immediately. "The appointment?" he asked. Emily nodded. "She is going to be okay. That is the good news." Emily looked toward the window. "The treatment is going to cost more than I expected." Vincent remained silent for several seconds. Then he turned his wheelchair toward her. "How much?" Emily folded her arms. "That is not your responsibility." "I did not ask whose responsibility it was." "Vincent." "Emily." She sighed. "You cannot solve every problem with money." A faint smile appeared on his face. "No, but occasionally it helps." Before Emily could respond, Lily entered the room carrying a sketchbook. "Look what I drew." She climbed beside Vincent and opened the page. The drawing showed a large lake, a giant mansion, a woman holding a little girl's hand, and a man standing beside them beneath a bright yellow sun. Vincent stared at the picture. His eyes settled on one detail. The man was standing, not sitting. Standing. Lily pointed proudly. "That is you." The room became very quiet. Emily looked away, worried the drawing might upset him. Instead, Vincent continued studying it. "Why am I standing?" he asked gently. Lily shrugged as though the answer were obvious. "Because that is how I see you." Vincent swallowed hard. Children had a remarkable way of seeing beyond circumstances, beyond appearances, beyond limitations. She had not drawn who he was. She had drawn who she believed he could be. After Lily left to show Marcus her artwork, Vincent remained alone with the sketchbook resting on his lap. The paper felt impossibly light, yet somehow it carried more weight than any medical report he had received in 20 years. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Vincent rolled into the rehabilitation room attached to the west wing of the estate. It had been years since he entered it voluntarily. Dust covered some of the equipment. The mirrors reflected a man who looked older than his age. Tired. Yet something had changed. For the first time in decades, he was not thinking about what he had lost. He was thinking about what might still be possible. He stared at the therapy equipment for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called Marcus. When the older man answered, Vincent spoke without hesitation. "Monday morning." Marcus sounded confused. "What about Monday morning?" Vincent looked toward the darkening lake beyond the windows. "Schedule physical therapy." Silence filled the line. Then came a quiet reply. "Are you sure?" Vincent thought about Emily. He thought about Lily. He thought about the drawing of a man standing beneath the sun. "Yes," he said softly. "For the first time in a very long time, I am." Monday morning arrived with a cold wind sweeping across the lake. The rehabilitation room had been cleaned over the weekend. Dust was gone. Equipment stood ready. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating machines that had remained untouched for years. Vincent stared at the room from his wheelchair. The sight felt strangely unfamiliar, as though he were entering someone else's life. A licensed physical therapist named Rebecca Lawson greeted him with a professional smile. She had reviewed his records twice and understood the challenges ahead. What she did not understand was why a man who had refused therapy for so many years had suddenly changed his mind. Neither did most of the staff. Yet Emily knew. Sometimes people changed because they discovered hope. Other times they changed because they finally found something worth hoping for. The first session lasted less than 30 minutes. By the end, Vincent looked exhausted. Sweat lined his forehead. His shoulders slumped. Rebecca reviewed a series of simple exercises before leaving. The moment the door closed, Vincent shook his head. That was pointless. Emily sat nearby reading a book. You lasted 28 minutes. And accomplished nothing. Emily closed the book. You showed up. That is not an accomplishment. For someone who spent years avoiding this room, it absolutely is. Vincent rolled his eyes. Yet he noticed something. For the first time, the frustration he felt was different. It was not the frustration of surrender. It was the frustration of effort. Days passed. Then weeks. Progress remained almost invisible. Some mornings Vincent felt motivated. Others felt impossible. There were setbacks. Difficult sessions. Moments when old doubts returned. During one particularly frustrating afternoon, he stared out the window and said quietly, "Maybe the doctors were right." Emily looked up from organizing paperwork. About what? About there being no point. Emily walked toward the window and stood beside him. The lake shimmered beneath a pale autumn sun. "Do you know what I think?" she asked. Vincent sighed. "You were going to tell me anyway. I think you spent 20 years measuring success by the wrong standard." Vincent turned toward her. "Meaning? You keep asking whether you can walk." Emily smiled gently. "I am more interested in whether you are living." Her words stayed with him long after she left that evening. 3 days later, Lily visited after school carrying another sketchbook. She found Vincent finishing a therapy session. "How did it go?" she asked. Vincent shrugged. "I survived." Lily nodded seriously. "That is what Mom says every time she pays bills." Vincent laughed. The therapist laughed. Even Marcus laughed from across the room. Then Lily held up a new drawing. This time the picture showed a man standing beside a lake beneath a bright blue sky. Vincent studied it carefully. "You still think this is possible?" Lily looked confused by the question. "Of course." "Why?" She smiled as though explaining something obvious. "Because every week you get closer." Vincent stared at the drawing. Not because it predicted the future, because it reminded him of something he had forgotten long ago. Real change rarely happened all at once. Sometimes it happened one small step at a time, even when the step could not yet be seen. 1 year later, the auditorium overlooking Lake Michigan was filled beyond capacity. Families, teachers, medical professionals, and community leaders gathered beneath bright lights and banners celebrating the opening of the Carter Hope Center, a nonprofit facility dedicated to helping children and families facing physical challenges and long-term medical conditions. The project had started as a conversation around a kitchen table. It had grown into something far bigger than any of them imagined. Emily stood near the front entrance greeting guests as they arrived. She looked different now, not because life had become perfect, but because the constant weight she once carried alone was no longer crushing her spirit. Lily, now 7 years old, moved through the crowd proudly handing out program booklets. Every few minutes, someone stopped to thank her for her artwork, which decorated several walls inside the building. She thanked each person as if she were accepting an important award. Across the room, Marcus adjusted his tie and smiled at the scene unfolding around him. For the first time in decades, the Moretti name was attached not to power or business headlines, but to something that gave people hope. As the ceremony began, a hush settled over the audience. Emily stepped onto the stage and looked out at hundreds of faces. For a brief moment, she remembered the woman who had once counted every dollar in a tiny apartment while worrying about bills she could not pay. Life had not been easy since then. There had been challenges, setbacks, and difficult days. But there had also been kindness, friendship, purpose, the things money alone could never provide. Then the master of ceremonies introduced the final speaker. Every eye turned toward the side entrance. The room became completely silent. Vincent appeared slowly, calmly, confidently. He was not in a wheelchair. He was standing. The audience rose to its feet almost instantly. Applause filled the room. Some people smiled. Others wiped tears from their eyes. Vincent paused for a moment, taking in the sight before him. Then he walked to the podium one measured step at a time. The journey had not been quick. It had not been miraculous in the way newspapers liked to describe such stories. It had taken months of therapy, determination, setbacks, and persistence. But the greatest transformation had happened long before his body changed. It had happened the day he stopped believing his life was over. Vincent looked toward Emily and Lily sitting together in the front row. A smile touched his face. 20 years ago, he began, I spent all my energy searching for a cure. The room listened carefully. I thought the answer was hidden inside another doctor, another treatment, another breakthrough. He paused. I was wrong. Silence settled across the auditorium. What I needed was a reason to keep moving forward. His eyes met Emily's, then Lily's. Sometimes healing begins when someone sees possibility in you before you can see it yourself. The audience erupted into applause once again. As sunlight poured through the tall windows overlooking the lake, Vincent stepped away from the podium and joined Emily and Lily at center stage. Together, they stood beneath a banner displaying the center's mission statement. In that moment, Vincent understood something he had spent 2 decades trying to learn. Hope is not something you find. It is something another person helps you remember was there all along.